There's been massive gains made by the anti-war movement in the United States in the last few weeks. So I'll begin with this major victory from Bernie Sanders and Senate progressives and so-called libertarians in the Republican Party all came together to vote on invoking the War Powers Act. I have an article from The Nation. The title is "Congress Takes a Critical Step Towards Reasserting Its War Powers Control." In 1973, as President Richard M. Nixon escalated an unauthorized bombing campaign in Cambodia, Senator J. William Fulbright asked, quote, "Does the president assert, as kings of old, that as commander-in-chief he can order American forces anywhere for any purpose that suits him," end quote. Later that year, Congress answered unequivocally that he could not, overriding a presidential veto to authorize the War Powers Act. 45 years later, the Senate took an important step last week toward reclaiming the war powers that Congress has abandoned in recent decades, especially as U.S. military adventurism in the Middle East grew in the wake of terrorist attacks of September 11. In a surprising 63-37 vote, the Senate advanced a resolution introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders that would end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's devastation of Yemen. As the first time a war powers resolution has ever advanced in the Senate, the vote marked a dramatic move toward returning control over matters of war and peace to Congress. It is also a testament to the power of anti-war activism in the halls of Congress and the grassroots to force a reckoning with the consequences of the United States' endless unauthorized wars. The fighting in Yemen, ostensibly a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, has created the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Since the conflict began in 2015, the Saudi-led coalition has launched more than 18,000 airstrikes, including the August bombing of a school bus that killed 40 children. An estimated 85,000 children under the age of 5 have already starved to death. Another 14 million Yemenis, half of the country's population, are on the brink of famine. A cholera epidemic that broke out last year accelerating, with officials reporting 10,000 new cases each week. Growing more desperate by the day, some civilians are selling their own organs to survive. So, for the first time in U.S. history, the Senate managed to bring up a vote to end the war. Bernie Sanders invoked the War Powers Act for the first time in U.S. history. Let that just bounce around your brain for a moment. At a time when we're doing at least 8 different illegal, unauthorized wars in the Middle East, none of them approved by Congress or the UN, all illegal under international law and U.S. law. We've been carrying out a shadow war across 20-plus African countries. Obama and Trump have been using the same dusty, raggedy-ass AUMF from authorization for the use of military force since the Bush administration. And this is something that I brought up on the show before, and a very big issue of mine. So, when 9/11 happened, Bush got 2 authorizations for use of military force. One was in Afghanistan, to go after Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. The second was the, quote, war on terror to go after terrorist groups, quote, anywhere around the world. So those are 2 AUMFs, and he used that to invade Iraq illegally. And ever since then, Barack Obama, he's used the AUMF to get the U.S. militarily involved in any country he feels like, and whenever he's asked about it, his justification is, oh, well, there's terrorist groups there. And the response from many progressives and anti-war activists is, okay, there are terrorist groups literally in every country on the planet. There are terrorist groups here in the United States, the KKK, neo-Nazis. Those are considered terrorist groups. So for you to use that as a justification to go to war, that makes absolutely no sense, because in theory, any other country could do that the same to us. The common example is, what if China was to go after some neo-Nazi or KKK affiliated groups in the United States and do fucking airstrikes and drone strikes and say, well, we're going after terrorists, and they're bad people. That wouldn't fly. Their warships, their drones, and their fighter jets wouldn't even get within miles of the U.S. border. They would have been shot down a long time ago. So the idea that we can use that same excuse to invade other countries makes absolutely no sense. So using the same AUMF has been one of the biggest pet peeves of U.S. foreign policy. At a time when it looked like the U.S. could not care less about actually abiding by the Constitution and international law, we get a vote to end U.S. support for the genocide in Yemen. I almost can't believe this, and this happened almost 3 weeks ago, and I'm still finding this hard to believe because, again, this has never happened in U.S. history. The way we do business is we start, especially in the last 20 years, we will start a war and then we'll just stay there forever indefinitely and have no plans on ending and leaving, just like Afghanistan, the longest war in U.S. history. We've been in Afghanistan since 2001. 17 years now, going on 18 years now. Longest war in U.S. history, as well as the most unpopular war in history, and I'm including Vietnam in that. So we start wars and we don't end them, so this is a big deal. And let me give you some of the facts from on the war or on the genocide that's going on in Yemen. 1 million cases of cholera, so a preventable infection that comes about from drinking dirty water. Again, Yemen's infrastructure has been destroyed. Many of the sources of clean water have been contaminated or destroyed. Food is scarce. Famine makes you more susceptible to cholera. So the cholera epidemic, we're largely responsible for in Saudi Arabia. 85,000 children starved to death. That is unacceptable. That should enrage everybody. 85,000 children starved to death under the age of 5. Can you fucking imagine? Since 2015, 85,000 children starving to death. And it's all preventable. It's all come about as a result of the relentless bombing from the Saudi regime, as well as a blockade not allowing any food or medicine into the country. So we're murdering children. 10,000 killed by airstrikes. 14 million, half of the country, is in famine and at risk of starvation. Reports that Saudi Arabia is arming Al-Qaeda on the ground to fight Yemeni rebels. So, which just leads to a whole world of irony, because originally the AUMF that Bush got was to go after Al-Qaeda, because Al-Qaeda was the group mainly responsible for the 9/11 attacks. So this whole war on terror that has led us to be involved in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, this whole war on terror was initially started to go after Al-Qaeda. And 17 years later, this whole thing has morphed into something, to a completely different beast. To where we're back to the point where we're back to arming Al-Qaeda. We armed them when they were the Mujahideen and with the Taliban under Ronald Reagan to go after the Soviet Union. We armed them already. And that's where they got a lot of the weapons that they were using to fight the U.S. during the height of the war. But now we're back to giving Saudi Arabia weapons to then arm Al-Qaeda on the ground to fight Yemeni rebels. You don't think that's going to turn into a problem later? You don't think the support of Al-Qaeda will, a known terrorist group, one of the few terrorist groups to successfully attack the United States, you don't think that's a problem that we're arming them at the same time? We're saying, oh no, we're doing all these wars to combat terrorism and protect human rights as we're fucking arming Al-Qaeda. Like, come on now. Another report, this one came out this week, of Saudis hiring, we already know they're hiring mercenaries, right? I just went over them hiring Al-Qaeda to fight for them on the ground in Yemen. As well as mercenaries like Al-Qaeda and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda that they have doing their dirty work on the ground, as well as torturing. That's also a issue that's been coming out of Yemen. We have Saudi Arabia arming and funding child soldiers in Yemen. 14-year-old child soldiers in Yemen. We're bombing hospitals. We're bombing schools. Like the article mentions, a couple months ago, we bombed a school bus and killed 40 kids. Half of the hospitals in the country are not operational, completely unoperational because they've been bombed or they don't have medical supplies to keep the place open because of the blockade. And anyone who's watched my show knows how I feel about this genocide in Yemen, knows my position on it. There is literally no argument to be made by the U.S. or anybody else involved to continue U.S. involvement and support of this. What we're doing is we're selling billions of dollars worth of weapons and missiles and bombs to Saudi Arabia that they're dropping on civilians in Yemen. Our military intelligence, our military officers are providing intelligence and targeting assistance. So they're in the command ops where they are deciding targets and where to bomb. We have our military officers in the command ops and the command in the operations center giving these coordinates, and like I mentioned, all these coordinates a lot of the time end up being civilian targets like hospitals, schools, markets, apartment buildings. So we have our military giving them intelligence on where to drop the bombs on civilians. On top of that, we have U.S. military. We have the U.S. military refueling Saudi jets as they are going to bomb Saudi Arabia. The distance is kind of far, so in order for them to carry out the operations, the jets need to be refueled, and the U.S. is helping them in their refueling operation. So we refuel them halfway through them getting to their targets. We help them refuel. So all these ways that and on top of that, we're providing cover to the Saudi regime on the international stage and acting as if they're attempting to follow the law in Yemen, acting like they're not doing a genocide, actively blocking UN resolutions and UN peace talks to end the genocide in Yemen. So there is no argument to be made to continue U.S. involvement. It's unconstitutional. The Constitution requires Congress to vote to go to war. The House did not vote for yes on a war in Yemen. The Senate did not vote yes in a war in Yemen. So it's unconstitutional. It's illegal under international law. Yemen did not attack us. The Yemeni government was not about to attack us. We have no business in their country at all. So we need to just end this genocide. It needs to be done like yesterday. Saudi Arabia needs to pay to rebuild the country after it fucking decimated Yemen and its civilian infrastructure that brought the country to its fucking knees. Oh, so I want to end this by saying a world of credit to Bernie Sanders for the first time in U.S. history invoking the War Powers Act, having the U.S. Senate vote to end an illegal war. And I cannot overstate how important that is. I cannot, because this sets precedent. This is the anti-war movement, the peace activists in the United States saying we're not taking this shit anymore. All of these wars are illegal. And for you to... It's one thing if you're a warmonger and you want to be involved in Yemen, you want to be involved in Syria, and you want to be involved in Somalia and Sudan and Niger and all these different countries, take that position, but let's do it legally. You want to go to war? Let's have Congress vote on it. Let's make a case. You'd have to make your case as to why the U.S. should be involved, and it needs to meet certain standards that are in accordance with the Constitution and international law. So if you want to go to war, okay, make your case to Congress, and if it's a convincing case, if the American people buy it, and it's also in accordance with international law and the Constitution, then we're happy. We're the anti-war movement. People like myself are principally against these wars and are anti-interventionists and think the only justifiable use of military forces in direct self-defense of the country. That's my position, and that's a lot of people in the left's position. And if your position on the right is to warmonger and to be a war everywhere, make your case and let's do it in a orderly way. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to jam all of these illegal wars down everybody's throats. They want to force the U.S. into all of these wars around the world, and then they refuse to have a vote on it. They refuse to have a vote in Syria. They refuse to have a vote in Yemen. They refuse to have a vote on Somalia, Niger, and Sudan, and these shadow wars that we have going on in Africa. Refuse to have a vote on it, but yet insist that the American taxpayers continue to fund all these wars at a cost of trillions of dollars. Iraq War, when all is said and done by 2050, $7 trillion. Afghanistan, $3 trillion in interest and payments and shit like that. So they want to force us to pay for these trillions of dollars of war to boost the profits of defense contractors and the warmongers and neocons around the world who profit off of this. And we're not allowed to have a vote on it. Fuck you and fuck no. We're going to force a vote on it, just like we did in Yemen. We need to force and invoke the War Powers Act on Somalia, Niger, Syria, all of these countries, Iraq, Afghanistan. We need to reauthorize them. The fuck you think you're using a 17-year-old AUMS for? We need to have a vote on all these wars. And what the vote will do is put these people on the record. You can't say, oh, I don't know, man. I have to do my research on this. I'm not quite versed on what's going on in Niger or Somalia or whatever. I need to be briefed. I need to have accurate information and all this stuff. No. A vote means you got the information. You know what's going on. You know these wars are illegal. You know the civilian deaths. You know the motivations of the defense contractors and them influencing politicians. You know all of that. So when we do have that vote on Somalia, we do have that vote on Syria, Niger, and all these other countries, they will have to go on the record as saying, yes, I completely 100% support an illegal U.S. attack on country X or country Y. Yes, I support the U.S. taxpayers spending trillions of dollars to fund unnecessary wars, and I will also say that fuck you, and I'm not going to pay for universal health care or single payer health care or universal college or any of these other programs that the American people want to actually spend taxpayer money on. No, fuck you. I'm going to vote in favor of spending money on unnecessary wars. They will be on the record for all of that, and it will come back to haunt all of them. They will lose their careers over this. So again, a world of credit to Bernie Sanders and anybody who helped this get passed in the Senate. And this is just another example of Bernie Sanders making big progress on very important issues. He's done it on minimum wage, workers' rights. He's done it on he's catapulted the single payer issue. So again, Bernie Sanders doing like he does.